Median house prices. Just reading up on some stuff for today's Wealth WOD. G'day there everyone, Michael Beresford here from Open Corp for today's Property Wealth WOD. A little bit of a joke there to start, just reading a bit of Cam's book, My 4-Year-Old The Property Investor. Reading up on median house prices, because that's going to be one of the key topics that I'm going to be talking about today in today's WOD. I've got here an article from one of the leading industry magazines, and quoting some of the industry figures as well. And as I was reading it, I just thought it was a perfect opportunity to remind everyone, I guess, around what's important with investment and what some of the key concepts mean, because I guess the fundamentals are very different to what can be communicated in articles like this one. For example, it's talking here about the Brisbane property market. It's talking about some of the Real Estate Institute of Queensland figures and the fact that in the last quarter there's been a slowdown with decreases of 4% or 2.1% depending on the different area, the different council and so on over a 3-month period. It also talks about performance over a 12-month period, which has been quite positive. And it also talks about specifically the Gold Coast, and it talks about how Queensland is set for an abrupt slowdown following the Commonwealth Games. Couldn't help but look at this and want to talk to you, especially those getting started in investment, around why articles like this one might seem interesting and valuable and full of statistics, when really when you look at the underlying fundamentals, all of those seem to be left out of this article. Okay, so first and foremost, when we're talking about price growth, it's really important to look over a long-term period, okay? Because any monthly or quarterly change is a very small period of time. And just because a median house price goes up or goes down doesn't mean necessarily that your property has lost value. This is what I mean. So if we look at what a median house price is, okay, quick reminder, we have covered this before, but it is such a fundamental concept. Quite often, people mistake the median house price for being the average, okay? That's not quite the case. What it is, it's the middle value. So let's say that there were 5 sales in a particular area. Okay? And when they're ordered from the least expensive up to the most expensive, the median is the middle value. Okay? So obviously we take one from both ends, and in this case the median house price would be 500k. Okay? Now this is a fairly consistent spread of pricing. What if we had a situation like this? Where we have 3 sales at a reasonably close price range, and we had some outliers. Okay? Now, when we look at this, the median at 450, okay, is actually far closer to a couple of the sales as opposed to a couple of the outliers. So the point being here, everyone, is that the median, the reason it's used is it's a more reliable indicator of market activity. Okay, so with this, in this case, if there was a sale at the very low point of the market, say 200k, or there was the most expensive house in the suburb that sold at 1.3, if you were to add that to this sales mix, then the median would not be changed significantly, but the average would vary quite significantly. Okay, so it's really just a robust measure to ensure that data is not being thrown out by variables at either the cheap end or the expensive end of the market. Okay. So there's a quick recap on the median house price, what it means, and I guess why it's important as an indicator of market activity. Like we saw in the GFC, just because the median house price drops or decreases doesn't mean that your property's lost value. Because it is this indicator of market activity, let's say, for example, that these 5 sales were the sales in sequence, then the median house price would be 420k. Okay? So just with this one sale, the median house price might have dropped, but tangibly, your property, wherever it might be, is not going to see any variability or fluctuation based on one sale here or there. Okay? So it's just important to realise when commentary is talking about a reduction in the median house price or growth in the median house price, the purchase price of your property will either be determined by the market, if you're selling, more reliably the comparable sales as an overall set in terms of the similar properties like yours that are selling in that area. Okay? The other fundamental thing with respect to this article in particular is they're talking about booms and busts. They're talking about infrastructure projects, railway lines, employment growth, all of those kind of things and amenities which are important. But if we think about the single biggest factor that determines price growth or slowing in price growth is supply and demand. And there was no mention of supply and demand in this article. So namely, for those of you that are familiar with Open Corp stuff, this will be a quick recap, but demand being population growth, supply being developer activity, and the amount of stock coming onto the market. Okay, so that's the most important thing. If we think about a recent example, remember when the cyclones came through far north Queensland and wiped out half of the banana crops? In Melbourne, where I'm from, bananas went from about $3.50, $4 a kilo to $16 a kilo. So to put this into some perspective for you guys, talking about all of the other things, like this article, is really saying, it's talking about the soil conditions, it's talking about the length of the tree, the leaves on the banana trees, it's talking about how many days in the last 7 that it was sunny or how many that it rained. All of those might have an impact to a smaller degree, but fundamentally, if the demand for bananas is the same and supply has dropped significantly, we're going to see an increase in price. Okay, so 2 fundamental concepts, especially for you beginners out there, understanding what a median house price is and understanding the biggest driver of price growth or price plateau is supply and demand. We'll catch you next time.